Being here in Kigali has been great. We're engaging with a number of seniors from the financial industry across Africa. And what is encouraging is that the opportunities and the challenges we're hearing here are the same that we see across the financial industry on a global basis. So when it comes to cybersecurity, the challenges remain around how do we educate and make people aware? How do we put in place tools and technology that will help protect the financial industry? And also, how do we adapt processes and systems so that we react in case that there is a cyber incident and response needs to happen? So these themes are very common wherever you go around the world.
All right, so could you help us understand what you are doing as SWIFT in terms of fighting against cybercrime among financial institutions?
Absolutely. So a couple of years ago, we launched a program called the Customer Security Program. And this program took a slightly different approach to a conventional approach to countering cyber threats. We recognize that the financial industry is a highly networked industry. So banks do business with each other. They do business with corporates, and of course they do business with consumers in the retail space as well. So it's important that banks focus on securing and protecting their own systems, but it's only part of the puzzle. It's also important that banks understand how they interact with others, and they need to be able to detect and respond potential fraud, for example, that may be coming from another bank, not actually from themselves. So there's this idea of counterparties within the financial system and making sure that the risk that could be posed by a counterparty is well understood by each of the banks. But there is a final angle as well, and that angle is around sharing information. And it's far easier to protect yourself if you know the kind of attacks that have been tried against other banks. You can leverage that knowledge. The bad guys, the adversaries, unfortunately, they only need to invest once in an attack method. But if we don't share information as a financial industry, then you have to invest over and over again to protect against that. So these are really the three angles that we're covering with the SWIFT's Customer Security Program. We think about banks as their own, as an institution securing and protecting their infrastructure, how they interact within the financial system, and their engagement in sharing information across the financial community.
So, what impact are we looking at 2 years after the launch of this program? How effective has it been?
So what we've managed to do is, in terms of the secure and protection, is we've really raised the bar and the level of security that is implemented by banks themselves. But what I'm most proud of out of the program is that we have increased the speed of detection and response. So if there is an attempted fraud, for example, we're able to detect that much faster than before, and we're able to respond to it and prevent any money actually leaving the electronic system. And that's ultimately the objective. So all three of those things that I was mentioning before have helped that happen. It's important to consider all together.
All right, so could you guide us through other initiatives that you are putting in place with regards to fighting against cybercrime apart from a CSP program?
Well, we've got a number of initiatives as a company, and again, very encouraged to see that they resonate with the audience that we have here in Kigali this week. So, of course, we have the Customer Security Program that I just mentioned. We're also helping banks innovate in cross-border payments to increase the speed of cross-border payments and the transparency in terms of cost and where that payment actually has got to. But there's another angle as well, which I think addresses, your question around risk and how are we reducing risk in the financial system, and that's around what we're doing in financial crime compliance. And we have a number of services which we're providing in terms of screening for sanctioned individuals, having analytical capability to look for money laundering, and also having information that banks can use to understand who their customer is and that they have properly identified the parties that they're doing business with. So when you take these three things together, when you take the payment innovation, the customer security program for cyber, and financial crime compliance, we think that comes together to make a way of doing cross-border payments and payments in general which is secure from a cybersecurity perspective, safe and trusted, and of course still innovating in terms of the value to the consumer.
All right. Do you have any statistics that indicate the prevalence of this issue in the financial industry across the globe?
So in terms of cybersecurity, I think there are really two impacts that a breach can have. I mean, one is in terms of disruption, and the other one is in terms of theft, and normally theft of money. And in terms of disruption, we've got a couple of good examples in recent history. One was the ransomware event with WannaCry, where WannaCry actually impacted on a global basis a number of services and companies. So, for example, in my home country in the UK, the National Health Service was down for a period of time, but also in Africa, if you look at things like plants and manufacturing, also had to stop production because of they were locked out of their systems. So this is one type of impact. The other one in terms of fraud is changing the whole time. There is fraud which is happening on the retail front. It can be in card networks, it can be in the banking channels. There's fraud which happens on a more high value basis as well, but this is evolving. So what we're seeing is that the number of incidents are not reducing, but as I said before, I'm really reassured that we're reducing the number of currencies where the money actually exits out of the system.
Finally, could you talk to us about the regulations that you think government need to put in place in order to fight against all these issues that we've been talking about?
We've had some great discussions here at the African Regional Conference around regulation and cybersecurity in particular. Regulation has a place. It is a way to ensure that there is a basic amount of security hygiene around all players in the financial system. It's important to have two angles though. It's important to have the encouragement and the education and awareness part, as well as the regulation which mandates action. The two work together, and I'm encouraged to see in Africa, as well as in other places in the world, these two things are happening in collaboration.